Welcome into Texans Today, everybody. I'm your host, Jeremy Chuggs, and on today's show, the latest Texans news and rumors. They made a couple roster moves. I'll tell you what they did, and the Jaguars also made a big roster move. I'll tell you what they did in just a moment. The Texans, they had some more draft visits before the 2024 NFL Draft. I'll tell you who they are visiting with. Also, Bleacher Report, they said the Texans' worst contract is Titus Howard at right tackle. Do you trust Titus Howard starting on this offensive line going into next season? I'll break my thoughts down on that later on in today's show. And a brand new Mel Kiper Mock Draft, along with a brand new Bleacher Report Mock Draft. I'll tell you who the experts have the Texans taking in the first 3 rounds. But before we get started on today's show, I, once again, need your help. I want to do a live show before the 2024 NFL Draft, or maybe even during the 2024 NFL Draft, but I need your help. My boss has said, hey, show us that there's enough interest in people wanting you to go live. So this is me showing them that there's enough interest. I need 700 likes on today's video to show my bosses that this channel deserves to go live before the 2024 NFL Draft. If you want that, if you want a live show on the channel, go down and hit that like button right now, that thumbs up icon, to show my bosses, Texans fans, they don't mess around. Now, first up on today's show, the Texans released 3 players. Magee Sanders, who they picked up off waivers last season. Alex Bachman, who is a practice squad wide receiver. And Josh Thompson, a defensive back. 3 guys released before the 2024 NFL Draft. So, making some room for maybe some more signings, maybe some more draftees going into training camp of next season. And AFC South rival Jacksonville Jaguars, they made a roster move as well, extending defensive end, edge rusher Josh Allen. Not the quarterback Josh Allen. Edge rusher Josh Allen. 5 years, $150 million. He is now the 3rd highest paid edge rusher in the National Football League at $30 million a year. He had 17.5 sacks last year. They ended up franchise tagging him this offseason, and now they ink a 5-year deal for Josh Allen. Interesting moves they're making down in Jacksonville. I like their defensive line they have with Josh Allen, Travon Walker, and Arik Armstead. I think I like the Texans' defensive line just a little bit better. Let me know which one you like better down in the comment section. As let's get right into these draft visits that the Texans had this week. We already broke down 2 running backs, some other guys the Texans have already visited with. These are the latest reports of guys who are coming in for visits. Joshua Cephus from UTSA, a local visit with the Texans wide receiver. You see his numbers on the screen in 2023. Over 1,000 yards, 89 receptions. This is a guy the Texans could look to draft maybe in round 5, 6, or 7 this season. Another guy they met with, Qwan'Tez Stiggers. And you're like, what logo is that? What college team is that? Didn't play in college. He's a CFL guy, Canadian Football League, and he's 6 foot, 197 pounds, had 53 tackles, 5 interceptions for Toronto last year. A guy who a lot of teams are very intrigued by. Shows a lot of good traits. Still only 22 years old. So could go in the middle rounds of this year's draft, but a cornerback that you should maybe keep an eye out for the Houston Texans as they brought him in for a visit. Another defensive back, this time from a more known program in the Georgia Bulldogs. Javon Bullard, 56 tackles, 2 interceptions, 5 pass breakups, was named the best deep safety in the Senior Bowl this season by his teammates. A great prospect for the Texans, and I would really like him in round 3 if he's able to fall. A lot of mocks have him going in round 2, but he met with the Texans this week. Another guy, another safety, Jaylin Simpson from Auburn, 38 tackles, 4 interceptions, 3 pass breakups this past season. Texans obviously looking at certain positions, safety being one of them going into the 2024 NFL Draft. Another guy they met with is linebacker Jordan Magee from Temple University. Shout out Chase Sr. 80 tackles, 3.5 sacks, 1 forced fumble this past season for the Owls. Another guy, the Texans, I believe they're going defense in this draft. I think they like the linebackers, the safeties in round 2 and 3, meeting with a lot of those guys. Something that I didn't see coming, though, was this meeting. Spencer Rattler, quarterback from South Carolina, meeting with the Houston Texans. Interesting move. I mean, Rattler has been climbing up draft boards the past couple weeks. I mean, a lot of people have him maybe going anywhere from round 3 at the highest to probably round 5 or 6 at the latest. Personally, I wouldn't want the Texans to spend anything higher than a 5th or 6th round pick on a quarterback, but I guess they're just doing their due diligence if Rattler does end up falling to round 6 and they're on the board and they're like, hey, we can get a backup replacement quarterback with a 6th round pick. Maybe that's their thought process, but what do you think? Should the Texans draft a backup quarterback this year? They have Case Keenum on the roster. They have Davis Mills with 1 year left as well. Do you think it's time that they draft a backup for C.J. Stroud? Obviously, don't need a replacement, so not going to go early in this draft. But do you see the Texans drafting a late-round quarterback this year? Give me a yes, give me a no down in the comment section. Another interesting meeting that the Texans had was with right tackle prospect Roger Rosengarten. Just kidding. Roger Rosengarten out of Washington allowed 0 sacks the past 2 years, protecting Michael Penix's blind side, which, you know, he's a right tackle. You're like, oh, blind side. It's because Penix, he's a left-handed quarterback. So Rosengarten, an interesting name that the Texans have met with because they're going to have to get him in round 2 if they want to select Rosengarten out of Washington. It makes me think, do the Texans trust Titus Howard? Coming off injury, they gave him an extension last offseason. Bleacher Report thinks the Texans should not. I'll tell you what they thought and what they had to say in just a moment, but couldn't do today's show if it wasn't for our sponsors over at PrizePicks. Go to prizepicks.com/CLNS and use code CLNS for a first deposit match up to $100. Want to play alongside some of PrizePicks' favorite players like Meek Mill, Sugar Sean O'Malley? You can find community plays under the promos tab of the app to view entries from some of the biggest names in PrizePicks community each week. Testing my skills on PrizePicks is the most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. If you have the skills, you can turn $10 into $250 with just a few taps. And it's not only basketball, it's not only football, baseball. They also have golf. And what better time to play some PrizePicks, play some daily fantasy sports other than the Masters? Augusta. I can smell the fresh cut grass right now. Now, I don't know a ton about golf. I try to play from time to time. I watch during the Masters whenever I'm trying to relax on a weekend, you know, lay down on the couch, just have some calming TV. But if you love golf, here's a good play from one of my buddies here at Chat Sports that does watch golf. He said Phil Mickelson, less than 2.5 birdies, and Victor Hovland, more than 3.5 birdies. You can use these picks, or you can fade these picks. Just do it over at PrizePicks. Download the app today and use code CLNS for a first deposit match up to $100. Or you can go to prizepicks.com/CLNS and use code CLNS for a first deposit match up to $100. PrizePicks is daily fantasy sports made easy. Now, Bleacher Report named Titus Howard as the worst contract that the Texans have going into next season. And I get where there's a little bit of hesitancy for people who don't know the situation around Titus Howard. Had a good couple years the past 2 years prior to last season, but this year only played 6 in 7 games. He was coming off injury to start the year. He had a hand injury in the preseason, and then he got injured again, so he only played 7 games. But his PFF numbers, they took a big dip because of it. 46.8 overall, a pass blocking grade of 49.6, run blocking grade of 38.9, and 1 sack allowed for Howard this past season. But it should be noted, and people don't realize this when they look at the stats, is he played more left guard last season than he did his position that he usually plays, which is right tackle. And I think he's a lot better of a right tackle than a left guard. We obviously had injuries to Kenyon Green. Also, Jarrett Patterson, Juice Scruggs was injured for half the year. So this Texans offensive line, besides Shaq Mason and Laramie Tunsil, had to do a ton of mismatching last year. I think Titus Howard is a lot better than what people think, and his move back to right tackle, even though the Texans are meeting with guys like Rosengarten in the NFL draft, they have to do their due diligence. But I still think Titus Howard, I don't hate the contract for him, and I think he'll have a bounce back year at right tackle this season. And if the Texans can figure out the left guard situation, him and Shaq Mason on the right side, that gives me a little bit of confidence in this unit as a whole. But what say you? Be honest with me. What's your confidence level in Titus Howard at right tackle? He was injured last season, didn't get to go into the swing of things, and when he did play, it was out of position at left guard and did not look very good. Scale 1 to 10, 10 being you're extremely confident in Howard going into next year, 1 being we need to get a replacement right now. Lastly, on today's show, a little mock draft roundup for you. We're looking at 2 mock drafts. One from Mr. Guru himself, Mel Kiper over at ESPN, and then one from the folks over at Bleacher Report. Let's look at Mel's first because I absolutely love Mel Kiper's mock draft for the Houston Texans. He only had a 2-round mock draft, so only 2 picks for Mel Kiper for the Texans. Jerron Newton with the Texans' first selection at number 42, defensive tackle out of Illinois, which this is a A++, a slam dunk. He is my number 1 defensive tackle prospect, even over Byron Murphy, which he's going in first rounds in almost every single mock draft I've seen. Jerron Newton starting to slip a little bit outside of the first round, but I still love his upside as a prospect. And then the Texans end up getting another great player in this Mel Kiper mock draft in Mike Sainristil, defensive back out of Michigan. Now, he plays mostly in the nickel, which we already have Desmond King, which I don't think it's horrible to have 2 guys who are really good interior cornerbacks who can guard slot guys, because a lot of teams are going 4 out. A lot of teams are having 5 out plays where there's 5 receivers out on the field. So, Mike Sainristil, Jerron Newton, I give this mock an A. I really love the idea of getting 2 blue-chip prospects on the defensive side of the football. Mel, good job picking for the Texans. Now, let's look at the Bleacher Report mock draft. A little bit different, and I don't love this one as much, only because I don't like the pick of Cade Stover in the second round. This is Texans pick at 42, Edgerrin Cooper, linebacker from Texas A&M. Then they went Cade Stover, tight end out of Ohio State. I get there's a connection with him and C.J. Stroud, but you have Brevin Jordan, you have Dalton Schultz. Tight end is not a need that you need to go for in the second round. You still need linebacker, you still need corner, you still need defensive tackle, which the only thing that saves this mock for me is getting Chris Jenkins, defensive tackle from Michigan, in the 3rd round. But I would say I'm much less intrigued by the Bleacher Report mock draft than the Mel Kiper. What say you, though? Which one do you like better? Mel Kiper or Bleacher Report? Let me know down in the comments section. That's all I have for you on today's video, folks. If you want to go follow me on Twitter, do so at Jeremy Chuggs. I'm giving you Texans news and rumors, the latest around the NFL, the dankest memes on the internet. And if you haven't already, go down and hit that sub button or go to youtube.com/TexansTV for daily free Texans videos. And don't forget, folks, before you leave, go down and hit that like button. I need 700 so I can go live here on the channel. Help me prove to my bosses, Texans fans, we don't mess around.